Hey, it's Susan Ragsdale with the Right Creations Group, and today I'm here with
Dan Horgan with Collabel. Hey, everyone.
Dan. And I have gotten to work together, and we love working together. And our spiel has always been around how do you engage other people in service, in the community, doing it on multiple levels, which is what Dan pretty much does every single day of his life, right?
Exactly.
So why don't we start there? How did you gain this passion and this spark for being an activist?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, I found my voice through service. I think that early on when I was in high school, I just started mobilizing my friends in really small ways to take on different types of service projects in our community wherever I saw need. And I think that through that, I started to both gain confidence because I was mobilizing other people to step up in ways that they had not before. And also, I was starting to connect and understand issues in my community that were sort of invisible in the past, right? It was being able to meet with people and really authentically hear their story that enabled me to understand more closely what was happening on the front lines of my neighborhood. And that sparked ideas, right? So I'm somebody who I'm a visionary. I like to think about solutions, be super creative, similar to you. And the more creative we got in our solutions, the more we started to spark attention and mobilize more volunteers or more people to step up to the plate and say, I really like what you're doing. And it's different, right? It's not the same thing that's been tried and true before, but this is something that is challenging our assumptions and helping us to get to a sustainable change that we're all looking for in our community.
So, do you think part of that, they're liking what you were doing, had to do with the fact that you were young, and in the sense that youth, like we were talking before jumping on here, that young people are more open, they're more creative, they haven't been slapped around with no all the time. So do you think it was because you were young and you were wide-eyed and open to possibilities and novelty and challenge?
Yeah, I think it was partly because we were young. I think partly it was like we were giving some people like things to think differently about the topics that they had been working on for a while and doing it in new ways, right? And we were re-energizing maybe people that have been working in these spaces for a while. I think as a young person too, it can often be hard to get a seat at the table. And so I think that also, although sometimes it plays to your advantage, right? Because you can play that young card and say like, hey, I've got this new creative idea, would you be willing to support me? And a lot of times people are willing to step up. But I think at the same time, it's not just there's sort of like surface level engagement, and then there's real in-depth engagement. And I think that for any young person who's listening, I would say understand and really leverage your power as a young person, because you don't need to wait for the approval or permission of someone who's older, who's been more in this space than you are. If you have a great idea or a solution that's going to address a need in your community, take that first step and show other people what is possible. I want to share this really quickly. So I had the chance earlier this week to engage Chase Jarvis from Creative Live in a session. And Chase is somebody who always talks about don't play small, right? The world around us sometimes wants to make us feel like playing small is the right thing to do, but being big and bold in our ideas and our actions is really what gets things done. And it challenges the status quo and it shows other people what's possible. And Susan, you mentioned this earlier before we jumped on about the rippling effect.
Mm-hmm.
When you play big, you create the biggest ripple because you're connecting with more people who have diverse experiences and perspectives. And that's what leads to change. And so I think that young people need to embrace their power. They need to take the action that they see as necessary and continue to be open and creative to the solutions that they're putting out in the world.
And us as adults too. I mean,
Absolutely.
when you said don't play small, I was just like, oh man, that feels so good, and I so needed to hear that.
Yeah.
It's
We all need to hear
true.
that. It's a great reminder.
So when you think back, because honestly, I know you as, you know, as an adult, and you haven't lost any of that ability to listen to people, to stay open, to be creative. And I think it's hard to maintain that. And I talk a little bit about that in the book I'm working on right now, on leadership, that you have to maintain that wide-eyed wonder and awe of a child to really take in what people are and not dismiss them when they're different from you. You've been able to maintain that. So do you have tips for the adults who are listening on how do you maintain that openness and that willingness to embrace diverse ideas, especially
Yeah,
when we're digging in community issues?
totally. I think first and foremost, it starts with the mindset. You have to be intentional about being open to diverse ideas, perspectives, and experiences. So what I mean by that is the action that you can take is set a goal every week to be intentional about connecting with somebody who's outside of your current network so that you can expose yourself to their stories, their experiences, their insights, the lessons that they've learned. So part of being intentional with that is also being super curious. It's natural sometimes to want to lead with our story. And what I would say is one thing that I've tried to be really intentional about is constantly leading with a sense of curiosity. How can I support you? Right? Tell me about your story, not just at the surface level, but below the surface. What got you there? What was the motivation? What was the drive when you hit that hurdle? How did you overcome that hurdle? And by learning those experiences and perspectives, it just equips me with more of that frontline point of view to fuel my work. And that's where I get my energy. That's where it fuels my passion. And it builds a network that I'm then able to connect other people to. One of my absolute favorite things to do every day is connecting, young talent who has a passion inside but hasn't quite realized it or brought it to the surface or embraced it in big ways, to connect them to people that are going to fuel it, be their board of advisors, right? Be that 30-minute spark conversation that young leader needs to take the idea to action. And I think of all of us, again, we're just super intentional about being curious and then leveraging those relationships that we're building, really manage those relationships. I think it will, it'll keep you on fire with whatever passion you have in this world.
You're reminding me as we talk, I remember the first time we met. And I remember sitting in these little chairs, Anne and myself and you asked those questions. You're like, you really wanted to know who we were and what made us tick. And so it wasn't just the intentionality of asking the questions. There was an authentic desire behind that to really
Absolutely.
know that came across. And I kind of remember thinking, this is different than any time, I normally meet business people for the first time who are like, okay, we're on our break from doing a training, because that's what we were doing. We were doing a training.
Yeah.
And usually during that break, you're going, okay, here's what we're going to do when we go back. Here's what we need to change. Here's what we need to correct. And you're just like, so who are you? What makes you light up? I mean, you ask better questions than that, but
Yeah.
I knew that you really cared. And so I think the other part is you have to cultivate that honest to goodness. I want to get to know this other person.
Yeah. And Susan, I would say too, one of the things that I really admire about our relationship and what you fuel the world with is the power of dreaming. I'll always remember, like, every time we would set up meetings where we would check in and catch up on the projects that we were working on and explore ways that we could collaborate, it was always like, let's do a dreaming session. And I think that's such a great perspective and a great approach to the work, because oftentimes we're like, what's our specific goal? What's our measure of success? And sometimes you have to zoom out from the current to-do list that you're trying to tackle and say, well, what are our dreams? What is it that we're trying to get to? What's the big vision? And then work backwards to say, how are we intentionally taking steps to get there? And I really admire about your work and the way that you infuse that through all your books and resources too.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't do well under here's the 5-year plan and
Right.
that doesn't work very well for me. So, it's probably kind of selfish when I dream.
Yeah.
However, Dan and I have dreamed about many, many things
Yeah.
together, and we've landed on a small project that we're going to do here, and I'm sure he'll share on his networks, where
Yeah.
starting, what we say,
September 14th. We're putting a date in the calendar.
September 14th, We are going to do our Zoom recordings live and share one activity per week leading up to, well, both of us or one of us will always be there leading up to the elections on leadership and activism. And we're going to hit our passion buttons and share that. So I'm looking forward to that a lot.
Absolutely. And we'll mobilize everyone here. We want to hear your great ideas and celebrate the successes that you're experiencing so that we can ripple those out to everybody else who's tuning in and watching what we cover.
So this is just a little intro. So everybody gets to meet Dan that I love and adore.
We'll build the suspense. I love it.
That's right. And we're going to talk more about leadership and all of that. Well, in this moment, because we were just kind of having a little chat, anything else you want to share about your sparks or engaging young people in their passions or activism?
I mean, I would just say in closing, I think that we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty right now, and it's often talked about, especially in the leadership world, like we need to balance certainty and uncertainty to feel, in check, right? To feel like we're on the right path. And with so much uncertainty that's out there, I just encourage people to, number one, reach out and connect. I know it's not always the preferred method to do Zoom chats and phone calls, maybe is old fashioned, but the idea of connection is really an opportunity to fuel ourselves with what we need to be able to both discover and explore further our passion, but also to move it forward. So many of the challenges that we're trying to tackle right now and get to sustainable solutions are not going to be things that we can do alone. Just say in closing, just acknowledge that you are not alone and be intentional about connecting so that others feel like there's this sense of community that they can tap into and get some energy from. And hopefully, in what Susan and I are going to put out there starting September 14th, we'll build that community in partnership with you.
And I just want to add, I read something just this week about when we connect, when we intentionally reach out and make that phone call or answer the phone or get on the video, suddenly all of our headspace that may not have been in a good place is going to bounce up because we get out of our heads and out of ourselves and we're showing concern for someone else. And so there's a mental health benefit too in connecting.
Absolutely. We all need it.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to do some fun things here in the future. Hit the subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss out on tips and activities and crazy chats, and share with others in the field so that we can do the ripple effect and support each other as we're going through this different kind of world in 2020.
I love it. And let us know what you need. We'll cater our content to make sure we're meeting your needs and is relevant.
Absolutely. Thanks, Dan. I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Susan.